here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we'd love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Jeffrey Bright, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry, and all that other groovy stuff. Has been in many musical combos, including The Pleasures Pal, also Myself a Living Torch, Jeff Bright and the Sunshine Boys, and various other bits and pieces. He has a very good website, so I'll put that in the link in the notes below. But to kick off the interview, we start, after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we start with that fascinating subject of the early formative years. Jeff, it's over to you.
I was born with one foot in the 1950s.
Right.
I'm 60. I just turned 67 on the weekend. So born in 59, and then I grew up in sort of suburban, rural Southwest Ohio, right?
Yes.
So the music that I was exposed to as a young person was mostly, I mean, the greatest influence has to be Elvis Presley.
Absolutely.
So, there was that and country music at the time, George Jones, Buck Owens.
Yes. So did you at that time you mentioned Elvis? Was all the other people like Little Richard and Buddy Holly and Eddie Cochran, were they did they come a bit later?
As a young person, you're exposed to what your parents listened to. So that was my formation of music. And then when I did go away to college in Michigan. From Ohio, about 4 hours north. And my musical tastes entering college were fairly pedestrian, the usual things that you would have heard on FM radio in the 70s in the middle of the United States, nothing to brag about, Aerosmith and the like.
Yes.
But by fate or coincidence, my college roommates were from Detroit, and they had a little bit more of an urbane edge to them than this hick from the sticks.
Yes.
And so I got turned on to what was happening at the time, and I still remember first hearing the Sex Pistols record, and it was like, oh my God, I didn't know anything like this existed.
Yes. Well, you would have, because I was a little bit too young for punk, really, by a few years. Whereas you had a 5-year, a little bit.
But I wasn't. I was more punk adjacent. So I kind of entered the stream in post-punk.
Right.
So, my first real commitment of allegiance was probably Joy Division. That the Manchester factory scene, so I sought out, I found a few record stores in the Midwest that sold imports, right? So I would go every week and I would buy, the latest release on factory. So I still have all those old 12-inch singles.
My God, that must have been so incredible. It was always nice, actually, in those days, because it was quite a story, isn't it? Or we remember those moments where you sort of saved money, went to a place, found the record, bought it, and it was like this kind of magical item.
You have to imagine that in the American Midwest at that time, I mean, this was like finding a needle in a haystack to find these records, and then to find people that also might appreciate it.
Yes. Well,
it was a very underground thing, right?
Well, absolutely.
It was kind of a swimming upstream endeavor to do this. And if you wore that allegiance on your sleeve or in your clothes or on the way you looked, you were a target. I mean, I imagine it being a little different in the UK. I don't know.
Well, I suppose I was brought up in the countryside and East Anglia, which is all very nice. But again, things were very slow to sort of get to us, and in a way, I mean, so it was quite conventional. It was kind of very much a heavy metal kind of community of people and the charts, and heavy metal in a weird way became, even though there was this rebellious quality and or attitude, it was still quite conservative underneath. So, the punk wasn't going to penetrate this sort of fan of status quo and Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. It was like that was a bit too messy, and it was a little bit too wild, even though those bikers would have been saying, no, we're the wild ones, we've got the denim jackets and leather coats, and we've
Yeah,
got the
right.
250 Honda or the 500 Triumph, whatever. It was kind of interesting to observe that in pubs and stuff. There was
Yeah,
definitely,
yeah,
you were still, you were sort of a rocker, but in a conservative, conventional way, ticking all the boxes. Whereas, punks would have just been, it was just too messy, really.
yeah,
it was kind of,
yeah,
music was very tribal back then as well.
yeah, very much so. Yeah, like I said, I caught just kind of the tail end of the what you would call, classic punk.
Yes, well, that was
So
quite interesting. So, where
in
did you grow up again?
Ohio,
Where was your hometown village?
Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, Ohio. Oh,
So that's
okay,
about 90 minutes on the freeway north of Cincinnati. So,
right,
not and Dayton was a hotbed of black music, really. Like Dayton funk is famous. The Ohio players are
of
from
course. God, it's just kind of hit me like a wet flannel
so
there.
yeah. So, but not necessarily known for anything else.
No,
Wise, maybe German oompa music, but
probably.
so but there were a few punk bands. Toxic Reasons was one that was the big one that was from the Dayton area and kind of went on to make a name for themselves. And there were local. There were some more
Yes. And I
local.
remember, I remember the first time I came across Cincinnati as a place was the Steve McQueen film, The Cincinnati Kid, which
Mhm.
was
Yeah,
hugely cool and groovy. And
yeah. I just watched that a couple years ago again.
God,
So
it's just such a great film. Was it
bathtub.
H.G. Robinson who was is it H.G. The main guy who wins at the end? God, that's a spoiler alert for anybody listening, wasn't it? But it's still beautifully tragic and a lovely end. So there you go. So you went to college then in the mid 70s, and then is it like you leave at 16 and go away until you're about
Well,
20?
I was so in uh, in my Ohio upbringing, it was very conventional, very suburban, and I was a teenage hot rod. Yeah, I mean, I sort of envisioned myself as tinkering with automobiles and building these really cool, fast, loud cars in kind of
Yes.
the local tradition. And I had uncles who were into that sort of a thing, and my father was a teenage hot rod. He met my mother when he was 19 and she was 17. So, and I think I was the reason for the marriage.
Right. Yes. This
So,
has all
so it's the
happened. Yeah.
classic, car obsessed 50s, ducktail, uh, kind of hillbilly hot rodder, you know, knocks up the girl, and I'm the result. So, we to keep them on the straight and narrow, my mother's father bought a house trailer, a mobile home
Right.
on his property. So that's where I lived for the first 3 years of my life in this kind of cool modernist vision of a home. It was like this coral pink and silver. But that's where I lived in a house trailer for the first 3 years of my life, and then we moved to a housing development. And so, that was my path was very localized. And then, so I wasn't sure if I was going to go to college or not, but I decided to pursue mechanical engineering because I just had no other idea what.
Yes.
I wasn't musical. I didn't have any inclinations in that direction, and so off I went to a place called General Motors Institute to become a mechanical engineer. And so that was in Flint, Michigan, just about 90 minutes west of Detroit. So, and that's where I bumped into these guys in college that turned me on to
Right.
all this cool music. So, it just it just changed it opened my eyes that, there's a lot more beyond. I mean, there's no internet then, right? So you are exposed to what you're exposed to or what FM radio or AM radio
Yes.
gives you. So, I'd always loved, I was probably more fond of like AM pop radio, in the 60s where you would get like Motown and, uh, uh, a kind of a good mix of things. Like for some reason, I remember Tommy James in the Shondells,
Oh, yes.
you
I think
know,
I've got a
Crimson and Clover, like that song always stuck in my head. I can never get enough tremolo, right?
yes. Well, that's kind of. I think there was a famous producer or manager of that band, wasn't there? Who was one of those people who sort of ripped off the artist, but they all probably did in those days.
Yeah, yeah,
You
for
said that there
sure.
was a book that I'm sure I've got somewhere, which I thought, oh yes, it mentions him on the cover, which now I can't locate. But it's kind of so. Then, as the '80s progressed, you had sort of punk, and then obviously you got the Joy Division bug and post-punk
Yeah,
period
well,
and stuff like that.
so being in Michigan in Flint college years, so we started going at that time. A lot of the UK bands were touring through on the post punk bands on their first or second tours through the US. So I caught one show in particular really changed my perspective. I saw Gang of Four play in Ann Arbor at a medium sized hall, and just that kind of political Marxist socialist funk. I mean, it really. I mean, this place was packed with people dancing and just pulsing, and I was like, "Wow, this is incredible!" I just really opened my eyes. So I saw them. I saw I saw U2 on their first show through the U.S. I sat down and had beers with Ian McCulloch in Detroit when they came through. I think it was for the Heaven Up Here album. There was no
Right.
club. So me and my pal sat down with Ian and we talked for, I don't even know if they played maybe a couple songs, but so it was that sort of thing. These bands had come through. I think I saw the Psychedelic Furs at a nice theater, and but I was always looking for these more intimate.
Yes. Well,
So,
absolutely.
and every once in a while, I think I did see New Order and Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. I think I saw them.
My God, you did see a lot of good bands at that
So
stage,
yeah, it
actually.
was that time, and like I said, I was buying all these records, and and then these bands would come through, and uh, I did get accused of being an Anglophile.
But
I
there's
just
worse
thought
things to get accused
the
of.
best music was coming from there. I mean, the American stuff at the time, it either had to be a little bit more blues based or a little bit more have more machismo somehow, or just be a little rougher.
Yes. So did
Like the
you?
replacements were big, and I couldn't. I liked them, but I couldn't latch onto them all the way. And I mean, I liked
Yes.
some of the stuff out of Athens, Georgia. REM and Let's Active was a cool kind of jangly guitar band.
Were the B-52s going at that stage?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I had their records, but I kind of never really thought of it as anything more than kitsch. But it was kitsch that kind of wormed into your brain instead.
Yes, because I guess at that stage, there was the sort of introduction of the video recorder started to make an appearance, and then obviously you would have had MTV, which we definitely didn't have.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
then during that kind of time, there was a sort of another shift in music where the indie pop world started to emerge, and I always put it down as the 1983, the year of the Smiths, and from then there was a little bit of they were there for 5 years, and every the
yeah.
Enemy, Melody Maker,
Yeah.
various
Well,
people
you know, I
were really
was a,
obsessed with them.
I was an NME reader. You know, I could buy it at some of these record stores, and so I read it in the U.S. and like not every issue, but I kind of kept up that way. So you know, that's how I would hear about these new bands, and the Smiths. That was a life changer for
Well,
me
yes,
when I heard
absolutely.
that. You know, I didn't. My first exposure was the album that was released on Sire in the US that I guess they didn't think was all that great. But, you know, the Troy Tate record that ended up not being the Troy Tate record.
Right. Yes, I've got you. Yes, I know. Well, I always thought it was kind of a major. They were sort of a major band that had appeared, and for indie kids, and there was all those other people like Everything But the Girl, and bands like U2 and Echo and the Bunnymen. They were a little bit earlier than that, and I didn't really put them in the same category. Whereas
Right.
people like the Mighty Lemon Drops and the Primitives, and yes, Age of Chance, the Shrubs, Wedding Present. There was definitely a like, okay, this is another scene that's kind of developing. I suppose those other bands were just on another, I don't know, another level, really. They had slightly been around a bit longer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll go along with that. Yeah.
And when did you start looking to be in a band yourself? Did you ever have any thoughts
Well,
of this?
so you know, I just really became. I've always had sort of an obsessive personality. So you know, as I became a record collector and consuming this music, and it just sort of became my identity. I was like the only. Um, how can I say it? You know, kind of new wave dresser in my engineering school. I was the
Yeah,
only right. So we're talking squares with calculators and, you know, pocket protectors. And then here's me, you know, with some crazy hair and wearing vintage clothes and long coats and, you know,
right. Looking quite
oh, and,
moody
you
at this
know,
stage.
so I thought, you know, I should get the hell out of here. This isn't me anymore. But you know, having this Midwestern kind of solid background, I thought, well, I'm gonna finish this. So you know, it was a 5 year school, but
Right,
but there was there was a literature class that was a requirement, and all the other engineering students hated it, and I found that I actually liked it. Right, so I started writing, and I actually wrote an essay about punk rock, and actually more specifically about PIL.
right,
You know, I thought they were so cool, you know, and so the teacher there was a fairly young African American woman, and she didn't say it was good what I wrote, but she encouraged me. She said, "Oh, you've got some passion here. You should keep writing." You know, and so I kind of took that to heart, and so I started writing. I started scribbling things down and scribbling things down, and you know, at that point, I didn't really see myself as participating in the music, as just being like really engrossed in it. And then I I met a young woman who was part of the scene, and she was from Dayton.
right.
She was a kind of a tragic beauty. And I was, you know, smitten with her. And we were like ships passing. You know, she was looking for someone of a more stable background, and I was looking for someone way more arty than me. Right? So we had this blissful, like amazing year. We got married, and then it all went south in a bad way. But, you know, during that period, she gifted me with a 4-track cassette player, and I bought I called it a string machine. It was a Korg synthesizer, but it had that icy, you know, Joy Division synth sound, right?
Right.
That's what I wanted. So I had that. You know, started playing these big synth chords and uh, recording that stuff. Had a little drum machine, and you know, that was kind of the first dabbling in it. And then I just started hanging out in the clubs, and there was in Dayton, and there was a handful of them. So there was a scene of people around saying, "Yeah, we should start a band. We should start a band. Yeah, it's going to be like this. It's going to be like this. Yeah, it'll be like the Talking Heads, but then we're going to have, this part of it, and then maybe like Bow Wow Wow. That would be cool too."
Yes.
So that there was just a lot of, I mean, everybody who went to the shows wanted to be in a band too, right? I mean, there are a few people that were kind of just fans, but it was all people who were creative, who wanted to participate somehow, right? So it's like every time you go to a show, you're standing at the bar, you're waiting for the band, and you're talking to your pal about, okay, well, who can we get to play drums? Well, who's a bass player?
Yes.
So you just kind of gradually work into this scene. Well, so there was a record store close to where I live. They just had like mainstream records. There was nothing there that I really wanted to buy. But the guy who worked behind the counter, I mean, it was really a head shop, right? Selling
Right.
paraphernalia, smoking paraphernalia. I wasn't a smoker, but I'd go in and check out the records every once in a while. But I got to know the guy behind the counter, and his name was Louis Lerma. And he was like one of the coolest guys in Dayton. He was a musician, bass player. He'd been in rockabilly bands. I saw him with this band called the Rockefellers. And
Excellent.
they were like Stray Cats before Stray Cats, right? They had the whole thing. They were super good. And so Louis and I kind of got to talking, and he found out that he was a big fan of Pete Hook's. He liked Peter Hook's playing. Well, Louis had a fretless Fender Jazz bass, so he had a really distinct sound. And then I saw him play in a band that was kind of a punk pop band called the Dates Triple X.
Excellent. Yes.
They were a really cool Dayton band in the late 70s, early 80s, and they had an attractive female singer that I was really taken with, but I'm pretty sure she liked girls a lot more than boys. So I heard she moved to San Francisco, but I've lived here for 30 years and I haven't run into her. So.
Right. Yes.
Anyhow, so Louis and I just got to talking, and I had fallen in with some other guys and started a band called B Pictures, and the first little musical thing I did, I just played keyboards and ran the drum machine, and that lasted for maybe one or two shows. I don't even remember. Strangers on a Train, I think we called ourselves after the Hitchcock film.
Right. Excellent.
And I remember, I was playing the Korg, and they had the little Roland Dramatics there on an ironing board.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the ironing board, because there's a band called the Farmers Boys in this area from East Anglia, and they also used an ironing board. I mean, I have to say, it didn't look good.
No, it doesn't. No, it didn't look good. So that lasted maybe one or two shows, I forget. But so then just, like I said, I was writing a lot of words on paper, typing up poetry, submitting some poetry to journals and things like that. And my marriage fell apart, and I was just like, man, I gotta do something. So
did you ever do hot rod racing, by the way? I was a bit intrigued when you mentioned hot. Was that your dad?
No, I was more of a street car guy. I was more for show,
Right.
So I had cars with flashy paint and big tires and loud.
Because I was very enamored with the Bruce Springsteen's track, I guess, from Darkness on the Edge of Town. Was it Racing in the Streets, that song? Was it a little bit like that meets James Dean from Rebel?
Yeah. I mean, it's the whole James Dean thing has always been like right there.
Oh, good. Yes, we went through a James Dean phase as well. So
so I mean, I still every once in a while I will watch Rebel Without a Cause. I mean,
did your dad race hot rods?
I never did. Nah, I mean, I did some illegal street racing. And Probably came a little closer to something I wouldn't have wanted to happen. Then,
No, well, absolutely.
when I think about it. But anyhow, yeah, I was into that for a while, and I had some cool old cars. But it's that whole kind of. I mean, that's that. I was interested in rockabilly. That when the rockabilly revival happened, I was really into that. Just
Did you come across is it Levi and the Rockettes? There was a band that
yeah,
came,
yeah. I think I have the Rockettes record. Yeah,
but obviously the Stray Cats were the ones that
yeah.
really
Stray
broke.
Cats. I'm not sure if I really dove further into it than that.
And then we had kind of psychobilly in this country that started like,
I
was it King Kurt and is it various other bands
Yeah,
which I can't remember, but
the Cramps. I saw them play. Early on, and that was pretty wild. So I mean, I've always kind of had an affection for the guitar sound, more toward like the Duane Eddy sound. That really classic big American guitar
yes.
sound. So and Eddie Cochran. I liked the Eddie Cochran records. But so that all kind of fit into that kind of 50s sensitive rebel persona, like this amalgamation of Brando, Clift, and Dean. That male character was a driver for a lot of the songs I wrote.
Yes.
The Pleasure's Pale. In fact, there was the very last song that we wrote before we split up was called "One More Reason to Boycott TV," and it essentially was premised on driving to Graceland, on kind of like a midnight drunken pilgrimage and dying in a car wreck.
Excellent. Oh, well, these are
As
all
if
good.
it were in a film about Brando, Clift, and Dean. It's just a very strange construct. But so that sort of classic American rebel idea was always running through my mind with the Pleasure's Pale. But my idea was to rejigger, recalibrate masculinity. And so one of the things that I latched onto with the Smiths was that same thing. I thought Morrissey was doing that. And so I kind of felt like, I was accused of aping the Smiths quite a few times, but really I thought we were just more an alliance. I'm doing this in solidarity because I feel the same way. You're speaking my language here. And,
Yes.
Morrissey's descriptions of Manchester and that, the place reminded me so much of post-industrial Dayton, this world I lived in where it was the Rust Belt. I mean, these factories were gone. It was all bleak, post-industrial, crumbling, factories shutting down, empty, so I felt like there was some real synchronicity there. I even sent Morrissey a demo of The Pleasure's Pale.
Excellent.
Just with a little note that said, "Hey, I think we're talking about the same thing here. What you're saying about Manchester reminds me of Dayton." He wrote me back,
Oh my God, that's amazing.
note from him. Yeah.
And have you still got your note?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Oh my
He
God.
sent it off by saying, "Be lucky." I don't think we were. But anyway, to circle back, I don't remember where I was. So
The formation of the band. This is
right. Yeah. So Louis and I, after I was in this band, I then after this gig as a keyboard player and drum machine operator, so then I hooked up with these other guys, who actually two of the players would go on to be in Guided by Voices, who became pretty big.
Mm.
And so the drummer, Kevin Fennell, and the second of the bass players we had, Paul Carter Comstock, they both played with Guided by Voices. And late 80s or 90s. I'm not sure. I left Dayton. But so I was the front man for that band. I could not sing. I could howl like a wounded animal. And I had, I had this kind of pit of despair and darkness because of this marriage that had completely fallen apart. And I don't want to say too much about it, but there were some tragic aspects about it, and it just hit me hard.
Well, yes, at that age, these things are everything, aren't they? We don't have any
Yeah,
perspective, and
yeah, right. So my wife and I rented this big house, like with a basement, big main floor, and an upstairs uh, in North Dayton, and then we split up, and she took I said, take everything. I don't want anything. So I lived in that house for like 3 years with nothing in it, just me,
right,
this big empty house.
God,
and so it was like that informed the writing. So this band, B Pictures, we were called, because I was also doing a lot of kind of like, uh, well, almost like Rorschach art, where I would just take these markers and scribble and then draw outlines on it. So it was like a therapy almost, right?
yes,
So I had all this wacky art that somehow represented this angst I was feeling. So that was B Pictures, and we were sort of we had a very good guitar player. His name was Jim Harper. And I don't think he ever went on to really play in any other bands, but he was super talented guy. He played a Fender Jaguar, and he could he could really rev it up. And so we were really prolific. We only played like 6 or 7 gigs, all at the same little venue in Dayton. But we recorded a lot of stuff, really raw recordings. So a part of my music archive work is I've been kind of resurrecting those, and some of them I've actually put new vocal tracks on, just to bring them back to life because what was on there was just not even usable.
yes,
So, but to honor that effort. So that was the first band, and that was in 1984, and it lasted not quite a year. So then the fall of 85. So by then I'd got a little bit of stage experience as a singer and frontman, and I maintained my friendship there with Louis at the record store. And so when B Pictures kind of disbanded, he said, well, hey, I'm not doing anything right now, so let's try something. And I had this big house. I said, well, hey, we can rehearse in my basement, just bring your bass amp and
well, yes. It
there you
sounds a
go.
bit like David Bowie. They rented Haddon Hall, which was a big place, which that was the very beginning of the Spiders from Mars. I think they all just went and kipped in this place. Tony Visconti,
Yeah.
Ronson, Woody Woodsman, they all, and Trevor Bolder. So it was a little bit like a community. So I guess it would have had the same vibe of being able to have a practice room.
I was the only one living there. Everyone else kind of had their own life outside of that, which I'll get to. That was part of the reasons why the Pleasures Pale didn't last any longer than they did. But to start with, so Louis, he brings in this fellow named Tim Peyton Eric as a drummer, and Peyton would go on to play with Guided by Voices as well at some point. And then Peyton had a friend who played guitar, and his name was Mitchell Swan. And Mitch was also involved with the Guided by Voices people. I don't know if he ever played for them, but he
Yes.
grew up with them. They're all from that whole crew of people was from an area north of Dayton called North Ridge. And for whatever reason, a lot of them got into playing music when they were teenagers, and there was a whole scene that kind of developed from those guys. So anyhow, so we get together in this big empty house in the basement, and Louis and Peyton just immediately locked. I mean, they were really good bass and drums, just kind of instinctively. And Peyton he's from like the Keith Moon school, right?
Right.
He's going to wail. it's nonstop. And Louis, this really unique style, kind of like Pete Hook, where he's picking the guitar and a lot of double picking, and it's like almost like lead bass, right? And then so this guy Mitch comes in, and he's an atypical guitar player for that period where we lived. He had no interest in aping, like Boston or Aerosmith or Leonard Skinner or Led Zeppelin. He didn't. That wasn't the sound that was in his head. He was more interested in pop music, like he liked Peter Gabriel uh, and dance music. He liked dance.
Right.
So he was really good, really great rhythm player, but he could also, he was really good with arpeggiations and actually playing like lead fills out of his rhythm parts. So we didn't need another player because we we had almost like lead bass, and then this rhythm guitar player who was very dexterous, could play really fast, and could throw in all these kind of like melodic flourishes in it. So we just hit it off like right away. So we did like the few 4-track things in the basement, and they sounded pretty good. And so that was the start of The Pleasure's Pale.
You're right. That was the beginning. And did you, at that stage, were you starting to get more confident about singing as well? Was
Yeah,
this
for sure. The first couple of the first gig with The Pleasure's Pale was sort of infamous, and not in a good way. I was really amped up. I thought, man, we got a great sound here. This is really good. And I got a little too happy with the pre-show drinks.
right?
I just ended up, forgetting the words and wailing, into the night. And so we called that the lesson. We That gig was the lesson. I had arranged to have it videotaped, and I destroyed the tape immediately.
Right, never to be seen again.
But it got better. It definitely got better, and by the end of the run, the end of the 2 years, I was feeling pretty confident. So Peyton then on the drums, he lasted one gig and then was pulled away, recruited by Bob Pollard and Guided by Voices. So then we pulled in another drummer that who was actually played bass in this very first thing I did, Strangers on a Train. His name was Jeff Keating.
Right.
He was a fixture in the Dayton music scene, played with a lot of bands, and he was a high school teacher, a couple years older than all of us, kind of a bearded fellow, and he was really totally out of place, in that scene, but he loved music, and he was actually, very technically musical, he knew music, right? The rest of us were just, playing by ear and winging.
So how were you composing your material at this early stage? Were you coming with the ideas, or did you come together as a band?
Very organic. We would just get together a couple times, 3 times a week or so in this basement of the house, and generally nothing would be said. It's just like somebody would start playing. A lot of times it was just Louis would start playing something on the bass, some riff, some pattern, some figure. The drums kick in, and then Mitch is in, and then, okay, I changed to this, and then I'd have my notebook, with scraps of words and ideas. And so there I'd sit, leafing through and trying to, find something that kind of fit what was going on. And then I would dare to start singing. It all just happened organically. There were very few instances where anybody came in and said, "Hey, I got a song idea."
Right.
And one of the songs that I think there's another important element here. I had because I had this engineering degree, I had a job at one of the GM plants for a while after I graduated, and then I started doing like freelance graphic design. Um, so I had a little bit more and no responsibilities, because my marriage had split up. So I had a little bit more money, and so I wasn't a guitar player. I had an acoustic guitar, and I was trying to figure out how to play some chords. Well, I went to the guitar shop and I bought a brand new Rickenbacker 12 string.
Blimey.
Just a beautiful thing, right? I mean, this blue, brand new 12 string, and it's just like, wow, an object of beauty, And so I tried to play it. Of course, I couldn't do anything with it. I said, hey, Mitch, try playing something with this. So he picks it up, and the first thing that comes out of it is No Joy, which was like one of the Pleasures Pale's most popular songs, right? And it just comes right out of the guitar. It's like it was in the guitar, and he just picked it up, and immediately there it was, And so the band falls in, and like within 20 minutes, we've got a full song, right?
Right.
Well, and so, I said, well, take it home and come up with some other stuff. So he comes back, and then I remember this rehearsal. I remember specifically. He comes in. He says, "Okay, I have an idea." Okay, so he plays these riffs that turns out to be the song that would become "My Town Has No Cafes," and so the funny thing was, I started singing, and at the end of we all thought it was great, but at the end of the night, he says, where you're singing the verse, I thought would be the chorus. So, but he said, but it's great. So, but that was kind of the way we were. It wasn't, nobody commandeered, what the song.
Yes. So looking at your Bandcamp page then, so the first time in the studio was No Joy, not the same song, and the second one was My Town Has No Cafe.
Well, so the way our recording worked is we just, the money we made from gigs, we just put in a pool, and everybody had jobs. Mitch was married, Louis was married, and so they didn't, and they had jobs, so they were not like, yeah, let's just pool all the money. So as soon as we had enough to go into the studio, which I believe was like spring of '86, April of '86, maybe. He said, "Okay, let's go in and we'll just start tracking, and maybe we'll do an LP. Let's just see how far we go." I mean, we were prolific writers. We had probably already 30, plus songs by that, in like 6 months of working together.
Yes, my God.
Yeah, we'd have songs, and then we'd play them for a couple of gigs, and then they'd fall out of favor. Something new would come in, some new idea. So we were going through songs pretty quickly.
And did you all demo them at the house and then went to the studio when you sort of?
A few of them, but mostly, I mean, we were a good live act. We were pretty tight, and so we just thought, well, we can just go in the studio. So we did it piecemeal. We started in spring of '86, and we didn't finish tracking until the last song until February of '87.
Right.
So we just piecemeal. I don't even remember which songs we did first or what we might have. I'm going to think about it. I think we probably sketched out like, okay, well, these are like the 12 songs we want. So let's go in and do basic tracks, and then we'll work on overdubs as time allows. So it wasn't concentrated into a few weeks. It was just progressed over time, and it stretched out. I think we mastered for the vinyl LP in March of '87, so almost a full year.
My God, that was the height of indie pop, really, your period between those 2 years. Because I sort of realised doing this show, I mean, and this period of music, most bands have a 5-year narrative. You know, they get
Yeah.
together, that honeymoon period, and then, you know, hopefully they get a single out of it. And we had, you know, John Peel show or Janice
Yeah.
Long or somebody like that who was fantastically influential as giving people a platform. But we also had those 3 weekly music papers, which were huge circulations, and that would give bands that little bit of encouragement to keep going a
Yeah.
bit
Well,
longer.
I was hugely jealous of that scene because
Yes.
we didn't have anything like that, and I thought we had a lot in common with, what was going on in the UK, but there was really we met with a lot of actually resistance in the US. People.
I guess who were you? I mean, because obviously we had, you know, you started getting the hair metal moment. We had that production sound that was kind of very, I don't remember if you remember Trevor Horn with that kind of Frankie ABC sound, very overproduced stuff. And then obviously MTV came along, didn't it? And so there was that, and even Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA album was so different to his early work that it was very bombastic at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, we wanted to more or less just document what we sounded like when we played live. Although Mitch did quite a few guitar overdubs, but none of them were like radically. I mean, it was a lot of just kind of weaving in and out of what he already played as the main rhythm track. So there wasn't a lot of anything that we did in the studio wasn't beyond too far beyond what it sounded like.
Right. And did you have a particular producer or engineer that was
We had the same engineer we worked with, a fellow named Gary King. He's still alive, and he's in Dayton, and he still works in recording.
I have to say the album covers are absolutely stunning, aren't they? And now
Well,
I realized you borrowed a lot, didn't you?
oh, absolutely, yeah. It's all
but
gone.
but if they are, I don't, you know, obviously once you
Well,
said
it's that iconography that I was talking about. I mean, it's uh, the whole. To me, the idea of the music it's very human. It's about humans.
yes,
And I wanted these kind of very human uh, faces, but I wanted them to be a little bit off kilter, sort of under duress or vexed, or
yes.
somehow
So who's the
not.
who's the woman in my town has no cafes?
I think that's just an internet mugshot find.
Right.
But she's perfect for it, I s- but they're I don't know, they're just faces or poses that I found somehow evocative of the music, and to me that seem iconic in a way that helps to convey what I thought the music was about.
And did you ever sort of travel, you know, in other states or other towns at this stage?
Well, so we mostly Dayton, but then as we progressed into 1987, we started playing Cincinnati probably more than Dayton,
Right.
starting to get a pretty good following there. We played a fair amount in northern Kentucky. Actually, there was a really cool club just right over the river called the Jockey Club. And that was a punk rock, definitely a real punk rock venue. This kind of raw place. We actually opened for Modern English in that
Oh
club.
yes.
Uh, that was interesting. And we played in Lexington a bit. So then, what we in our playing in Cincinnati, we connected with a guy there called Steve Schulte. And Steve was in a band called Red Math, and they were kind of a new romantic sort of band, very arty and artful, I should say.
Yes.
Uh, they were extremely good, very flamboyant, and interesting to look at, and they had these really kind of evocative and mysterious songs. There was a little bit more new romantic sort of vibe. And Steve wanted to start a record label with Red Math as, the primary band, but he figured it would be better if he had another band that was on the label that we could maybe get some major label attention. But, that was the time when indie labels were just starting to rise up.
Yes.
Anyways, right? So, this is late 86. So he says, well, you do this record, we can't pay for it, but if you produce it, I'll get it distributed, right? And you'll be on our label, Heresy Records, it's called, right? So, The Pleasure's Pale and Red Math on the Heresy Records. So, after maybe a month or two, he gave me a call and he said, hey, Capitol Records found out about what we're doing. They're super interested in you guys. So I went, wow, okay, that sounds great to me. And then something followed in from Geffen. So, just on the word, I don't know. I think Steve had a demo of some of our board mixes, from
Right.
few sessions. So we had some major label interest. So, we got a letter from Capitol, and they're saying, okay, well, we want to see you play. We want to see you play regionally. So, I started booking some gigs: Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, and we played Cleveland. Good show there. We did play a gig down in Atlanta. Louis had one of his ex-bandmates from the Rockefellers had moved down there. And so we played down there at the place called the Metroplex. And that was okay. And then we were scheduled to play Chicago in October of 87. The record wasn't out yet. It was delayed in production. They couldn't get they messed up the jackets, and the distribution wasn't lined up yet. So we're like, where's this record? Come on. It's been done since March. Where is it? And now we're in October.
Yes.
So, we have this Sunday night gig in Chicago. So we pile in a van, we drive up there 6 hours, we play, there's no one there. Absolutely no one. I mean, we just had no way to really promote it. Didn't have anything we could send, like a college radio station or anything. It's really deflating. So, we drove back the same night. It was brutal. And like 2 days later, Mitch calls me up and says, I'm done. I quit. I can't do this. So that was the end. So we had just really, I had booked some shows in like Nashville and some other, just, trying to spread the ring out.
Yes.
And, widen our circulation. But I think some realities became apparent. It was going to be a major lifestyle change for everybody involved. And for me, I was unconnected to anything resembling responsibility. So I'm like, come on, let's go. This is our big chance, But
God,
the reality of what was going to happen sunk into some people. And, but by this point, like people's egos and identities in what we're doing, they're starting to really take shape. We're doing some great shows, and so you start to get a little bit full of yourself, right? And it should be my way, or it should be my way, and those things inevitably happen. And so when I look back on it, I think, well, I could have probably been a better manager, leader, whatever, and held it.
Yes, it's always tricky. You sort of yes, we were young.
At the same time, it's like, I don't want to be in Dayton any longer. I got to get the hell out of here. But I had moved to San Francisco. And, I was definitely feeling a lot more confident about my musicianship and writing abilities. And so I thought, well, all right, well, I'll just...
So with the release, you got the album came out
Yeah.
originally in 87. But the singles
Didn't
that
actually
all
come out until 88.
right, 88. By
So we
then, the band were over by then.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so it was kind of like a moot point, and, it's like it came out and, the label, Heresy, they tried to promote it a little bit, and this distributor, they were called the Independent Label Alliance, they didn't really do much with it. I think it was there were a song or two on a compilation, but it didn't really, and we had a few good reviews here and there, a little bit of college radio airplay.
Yes.
There wasn't really enough to like encourage any of us to say, okay, that's all right. Well, let's get back together and try to make it happen.
So on your Bandcamp page where you got them as singles, are these all sort of reissued decades later that you've put
Yeah,
them
yeah,
out?
that's all me. Yeah, during the time, the only thing that was ever released was the LP. So everything
Right.
else on there is, for better or worse, I'm the one who seems to be the keeper of the Pleasures Pale archive.
Yes. Well, it's good that
All
someone's
the
managed.
tapes all ended up with me, and so about 10 years ago, I thought. So well, I moved to San Francisco in '88, and then I played music for another 10, 11 years here in some different bands, and then in 1999, at the end of the year, I said, "Well, I'm going to take a little hiatus." I was getting burned out, and so then I kind of got lost in the woods, literally.
Right. So how did you find the 90s musically? Because it's very different to the 80s. I mean, we had Britpop, so it became a little bit more polished, but I suppose actually there were all the people who had been watching those indie bands in the 80s formed bands and became very successful in the 90s, whereas America sort of it got very heavy, didn't it? And metal,
Yeah,
rap.
right.
I mean, and ends with Woodstock 99, which is not the best festival, I would imagine. I mean, to
Yeah.
go to. I mean, the lineup was hideous, but it was quite a toxic atmosphere in the 90s, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Well, after the Pleasures Pale, um, I I went in a completely different direction. I kind of tapped back into my more kind of rustic Elvis country roots, and I partnered up with this fellow. His name then was Eric Schultz. He's now goes by the name Harlan T. Bobo, and he's a musical genius. Uh,
Right.
Ranger, guitar player, songwriter. He lives in France now, in Perpignan. Well, so he was like 6 or 7 years younger than me, and he came up to me at a show after the Pleasure Palace split up and said, "Hey, I want to be in your band." I didn't have a band. I said, "Well, let's get together and write some songs." So we did, and I mean, his guitar playing and arranging skills are just extraordinary. So okay, let's see what we can do. So we started making some music together, and I was steering it in this sort of uh, I don't know, like Chris Isaac adjacent direction. This kind of romantic, kind of crooning Americana notion that goes back to this Elvis thing.
Mm.
That my Elvis vibe is. My parents belonged to the Columbia Record Club. When I was a young lad, and so that meant that every month they had to pick some record for and buy it, or if they didn't, you would get the default record, right?
Right.
The Columbia label wanted to send you. So we had this collection of like middle of the road pop, some country stuff, probably that my dad worked uh, in the metalworking industry along with a lot of people from the South who liked country music. So I think he picked up some interest in that music. so like I said, we had these kind of country records, but the one record that I still own to this day and have nearly played through is Elvis Presley's Greatest Hits, Volume 3. And that record is not the hillbilly Elvis Presley. It's not the Sun Sessions Elvis Presley, but it's the Nashville Elvis Presley.
Right.
That early 60s period when he came back from the war, he had the best pompadour. Then he was so stylish, and his voice command was just amazing. Then, if you really, really like, Little Sister and his latest Flame, Now or Never, Surrender, you know, uh, those songs that, they're all these different styles, right? He was a style hopper. And that's what the Pleasures Pale were, too. We were style hoppers. If you really listen to it, you'll hear all these different styles of music in there. I mean, the songs that seemed to be the most popular were the ones that were kind of more in the vein of what was happening in guitar pop at the time, New Joy and My Town Has No Cafes, these kind of bigger guitar anthem songs. But there were a lot of other kind of rockabilly, there's like a country song, Monday Morn. There's some oddball songs like uh, Love Bites Back, um, A Heavy Coat of Jokes. I mean, those are kind of odd musical configurations, but and there's the songs like But She Didn't, which is kind of a Motown swing thing. So we had, like, Louis he's a walking encyclopedia of American music. I mean, he just knows all this music. And Keating was, who became the drummer in the middle period of the Pleasures Pale. He knew all this music too, and he liked swing music and dance music and more than
Yes.
rock music. So he was always trying to push it away from like straight up rock, right? So we were definitely style hoppers. We were never like, well, let's make it all sound this way. We were like, well, let's do one like this and one like this and one like this and one like this. So it had a lot of variety.
Yes, it's got a great sound, and yes, like you said, it sort of fits in to that period so brilliantly as well, which was
Yeah.
quite interesting. So then, what were you saying about your musical collaboration with this
Oh,
guitarist?
so yeah, so we then connected with another young fellow on the Dayton music scene. His name was Chris Green, and he was a bass player, and he was mostly known for playing in this band. It was one of Dayton's premier alternative music bands. They were called Dementia Precox. They
Mm,
were like an industrial band, and industrial art noise band, and they were led by this really charismatic singer named Jen Cameron, and they were really good. I mean, they were in that sort of like Cabaret Voltaire mode,
mm.
Throbbing Gristle a
I
little
was
bit.
going to say, was it Throbbing Gristle period?
Not quite. They were a little bit more pop than Throbbing Gristle. They had hooks.
Right.
you know, but they were really good. But Chris was that bass player, and he, for whatever reason, he was done with them, and so he said, "Well, I'll move to San Francisco with you." So he moved. So the three of us and my girlfriend then at the time, who's now my wife, piled in vehicles and we drove across the country and we settled in San Francisco. And so we started playing. We called ourselves Dark County, which is the county where I was born, and it's
Right.
in southwest Ohio, which I'd like to say in the bios that at one time it was the leader in the car and train fatality statistics. So I mean, it's just because it's all about this mythology, the automobile and the open road, and so that was, again, it goes back to that sort of 1950s.
So was this a four-piece band?
Yeah. So then, we did some recordings that were, just drum machine, then kind of, demos. But then we found a drummer that we liked, and he was a punk rock drummer from the East Bay here, Oakland. His name's Christopher Fisher, and he was with a band called Impatient Youth that was uh, a pretty well known punk band here in the 80s.
Right.
So he he stepped in as drummer, and we did a few recordings, you know, professional studio recordings. We did a lot of home recording. I have a lot of material from that era of this fellow Eric, now Harlan T. Bobo. He would just throw these ideas down on tape, just one after another, and they're just extraordinary. So, I've actually been resurrecting a lot of that stuff.
Yes. And that's
There's
also, and you've also got that out now as well, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah. So that's like the the release is called Edge of Night, and so it's all this kind of sort of David Lynch
Yes, I
influence.
was going to say when you mentioned Chris Isaac,
Yeah, it's
it,
got that, that kind of uncomfortable undercurrent.
because I
So
suppose before that we'd had Dwight Yoakam, hadn't we? And
yeah,
then there was Steve Earle, and that sort of, I suppose Americana started to become a bit of a thing.
yeah,
Wilco, Jeff Tweedy, was
yeah,
it
right.
Uncle Tupelo? Yes, all those guys. That it all started to the 90s started to sort of slip in that direction, didn't it,
Yeah.
really?
Right. So yeah, I found myself going that direction, and then um, I don't know. Our rehearsals started getting louder, and we were sort of fashioning ourselves as these midnight troubadours. This kind of spooky music with a lot of space in it.
Yes.
I don't know. We started just playing more rock. I don't know how else to say it. We just started like, well, we have a harder edge to ourselves. And so we thought, okay, well, we got to change our identity. So then it was very unpopular with our followers at the time. We changed our name to Myself, a Living Torch.
God, that's God, what ideas did you reject? My God, that's a hell of a
Well, I had one of our followers come up to me and said, "That is the most pretentious name I have ever heard. I hate that." It comes. I started reading a lot of French literature after I moved here. Like a lot of the erotic stuff and the kind of radical stuff. But actually, that phrase comes from Celine's book, Death on the Installment Plan.
right.
There's just one little passage in there where, the main character in that film is just this grubby guy who's everything happens to him just terribly while he's working in some underground shop of this man who flies hot air balloons, and it's all filled with all these chemicals and stuff. And he's he's just saying that he thinks that one false move, and myself, a living torch. It's all
So yes, that's
really
where the
cool.
idea.
So that's where the name came from. But anyhow, I just thought, well, and think also that the country, the U.S. had that was George Bush, right,
Yeah.
and the Iraq War, and the country had turned back to a conservative thing again. And in San Francisco was still. I mean, there was still the AIDS epidemic was still all around us. And San Francisco being kind of a center of LGBTQ plus culture. I mean, this. it's just, I just felt like we needed to be more political, more non-compliant. It's my word for that music. It's like this kinky, non-compliant, loud guitar music. And, it gave then Eric, now Harlan, a chance to really be out front with his guitar playing. And I confess that, I was really into the Pixies. I really loved what they were doing, their early stuff. But the drummer and I in '92, we saw My Bloody Valentine at the Warfield Theater here.
Right, around Loveless, I guess.
Yeah. And, then of course famous for the volume, right? But I mean, it was just quite an experience, like being in the room with rockets taking off. But I don't, it's compelling. It's compelling music, and it felt right to me at the time. So I encouraged Eric Harlan to uh, investigate guitar sampling. So play a riff, sample it, and then play it on a foot pedal and play against that. And
Yes.
he was really good at that. So we had some pretty cool guitar adventures. And, the lyrics got more confrontational, they got more political, but in a political in a more humanist way instead of an overt way. So, in a way, I felt like that music had circled back closer to The Pleasure's Pale than anything that I had ever done since, right? I mean, this Dark County was like this in between period. I love listening to that music. It's like this universe of very interesting sounds and this kind of spookiness to it that I'm really attracted to. But I thought, in terms of urgency and uh, powerful, impactful words, that's what I wanted to get back to. And I think Myself a Living Torches was there. I mean, it was a little too, uh, it wasn't it wasn't rock enough to be taken
Right.
seriously by like the grunge people, and it wasn't pop enough to be pop, right? It was kind of on that line. No, we call it noise pop now. I think is what you'd probably call it, but you know, I'm not sure that genre was quite established or
Well, I have to
identified.
say, you've got the most amazing website. You've documented and sort of archived all your work so well. It's
Well,
really beautifully put together.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, it's uh yeah, like I said, I just turned 67. So right, you start to, I think any man who lives past like 55, you start to think about your mortality, right? It's like
Yes.
what will I leave behind? What your legacy? What did I contribute? And if you're a person of the arts or a communicator or a creative person, you like to think about what you did, what did it mean, and
Mhm.
you know, well, like I said, I also got lost in the woods. I have this bifurcated life where I have this career in the natural world too, writing and photographing. I don't want to go too specifically about it here, but so I did kind of go away from music, and I started going to wild places and being out in nature and seeing that part of the world. And part of me wants to try to make sense of these two different kind of lives I've lived. And so doing this archive and writing about it,
Right.
and in a way, I can be. I'm not. I'm not under the illusion that I'm going to make a lot of cash from selling this old music I did, which was always a little too esoteric for the industry. You know.
Yes. But
But
I was going to
but
say, once that project finished, you then brought out the Sunshine Boys. This is your.
yeah, so that was how can I say it? You know, we did the Myself a Living Torch in 1992. I got together some money, a pretty big chunk of money, and we went into what I thought was one of the best studios in San Francisco at the time. Brilliant studios, big live room, brick walls, and like this really cool Neve board, all this kind of classic uh, analog gear. And they had made some great sounding records there, and as Dark County, the guy who owned that studio heard one of our tapes, and he got in touch with us and said, "You guys are different. You're really different. I think we want to do something with you. We want to maybe do something on spec." And then I was all keyed up about that. And then the Iraq War hit. He said, "I don't know, man. I feel differently now." So, the carrot was dangled and then it was pulled away. So anyhow, as we got Myself a Living Torch together and had some kind of songs that we were happy about, I got back in touch with this guy and said, "Look, I've got some money together. I want you to, produce like an EP for us. We got 6 songs we want to do." And so we recorded these 6 songs, and we didn't really have a deal or anything. And I said, "Well, we'll just self-release it, and it'll be something that we can promote ourselves with, anyways." So we did this CD. It was called Citizen Self, right? Which was made in '92, but it wasn't ever released anywhere. I released it in 20 18, 19, something like that.
Right.
To a digital release. So after that, so then we did all this home recording uh, on an 8-track, and I've been releasing that stuff. That's the Instant Carmen, Cannot Get Me, and then there's a whole nother LP worth of stuff that will be called The Human Condition. So there's a whole bunch more Myself a Living Torch stuff, and there's some like even pre Citizen Self records. So there's like 3 to 4 LPs worth of stuff there.
Yes.
So, so here we come into 1993, and just that inevitable burnout. If you don't latch on and you don't get some success somewhere, then I've always been kind of a restless sort. So I was getting better at playing guitar, and there was more of a vibrant folk ish scene here in San Francisco, like the freak folk thing.
Right.
Bondra Barnhart and what's her name? Newsom? I forget. But so there, and we were kind of peripherally involved with this set of people in a band called American Music Club. Mark Eitzel, are you familiar with?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Very talented guy. So, we knew those guys for a long time. And I think, that music it started to seep into what we were doing. So sort of post rock, Myself a Living Torch, we started doing this almost like doom folk thing, right? So that's how the Sunshine Boys started, where we were doing these like the saddest songs you could think of to write, but in a kind of stylized folk country form, right? So that's how it started, the Sunshine Boys.
Right, I got you. So freak folk that was the umbrella title of that genre, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what some people have called it. Yeah.
And is that part of the Joanna
Yeah, Joanna
Newsom?
Yeah, she was in that scene. She was from
And Banhart and all that. Yes, I remember. Yeah, that was kind of an interesting.
But Mark, on his solo stuff, Mark Eitzel, that was always right up that was his main avenue, the acoustic guitar, finger picking, these emo songs, So I wouldn't say that we were like trying to compete with that, but I think somehow, that rubbed off on us and I thought, well, let's kind of try our hand at that for a while too. But we did it in a more kind of circling back to like what Dark County was, where it was like more roots, Americana roots, but the themes were still a little bit more sophisticated and nuanced, I thought.
Yes.
So that's how it started. But okay, so here's the interesting part. Then as the 90s progressed to the middle of the decade, that's when the tech boom happened here. So in a matter of a couple of years, the city of San Francisco was jam packed. These people working in the tech industry, and they were making money hand over fist, right? And you could like when I first moved to San Francisco in the late '80s, it was kind of recessionary times. Nobody had two quarters to rub together. You could always get shows, and it wasn't hard to live here.
Yes.
It was inexpensive. It was bohemian. You know, you could always go out for a couple beers or what. You could go to the first Thursday art shows and get all the free wine and snacks you could eat, right? So as a young, creative bohemian type, it was a great city to live in. Well, then it all started to change there in the mid '90s, and so this, the first .com boom is happening, and every night of the week, every bar is filled with people throwing money over it's like the gold rush, right? So we're a band and we're the Sunshine Boys. And all of a sudden we realized, well, we could play every night of the week almost and make $500, which would, for a local band trying to, keep playing. We thought, well, all right, let's do that. And meanwhile, Eric, some of my guys had, they had developed some problems with substance abuse and they left. And so I started to get new guys and they were more like traditional musicians. So we started playing like more. And at the time, like all these kids wanted to Lindy hop. They wanted to.
Right, of course, jive and Hinlindy, yes.
You remember the swing scene, right? There was, some of that made it into the mainstream. And Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, was kind of like one of the names that made it out of that. Well, so on the street level, a lot of that was happening. So we kind of came in from the back, and we started doing it in sort of a countrified, like retro late '50s, early '60s style. Kind of a stylized cocktail country, if you want to call it.
Yes, lounge was also getting big, yes.
Yeah, so we started playing around the city and, making some not bad money doing that, and doing some home recording and, documenting it. But one thing led to another. And the next thing I know, we're all wearing like, retro vintage gabardine shirts and Levi's with the cuffs rolled up, a foot in these old Acme cowboy boots and playing Western swing. But I mean, they were mostly original songs I was still writing, but I found I knew this vocabulary, this music vocabulary. I could write 2 or 3 of those in a day. You know, it's very kind of formulaic music. If you really start listening to the music from the late '50s and the early '60s, that like my favorite is like the Ray Price stuff,
right?
Price Nashville stuff. I mean, just the sound quality of that music is so lush and rich. I just love the way it sounds. So that was kind of the goal, and then that's the direction it went. And by 1999, I realized, and we teamed up with a little independent label and put out a CD. It was pretty well done, I thought, and we were pretty popular. But I just thought we've become a bar band. How did I get here? How did I get here from B Pictures, this kind of like wannabe Joy Division band, to here I am playing, this highly stylized Western swing music playing like 3 sets a night in these. I mean, we were playing out in like rural California and
I
playing
could see,
these
yes.
clubs where like Johnny Cash and Patsy Cline had played, and that there's a whole history of that I was attracted to. But at the same time, it was, it became almost a little too retrograde in a way.
Yes. So 1999 is when you pulled the plug on that.
Yeah, so I told the guys, all right, I'm going to put the guitar away for a little bit, do a little hiatus, and I never went back. I kept waiting for them to say, "Come on, let's go, let's get back." And then, I mean, the guy from the record label was pissed off because he thought we should be out there touring. I said, "We, generate some radio interest, and I'll get back to it."
So then what did you do for the O years after the 2000s? What was
Well, that's where I got lost in the woods. So, this other side of my duality is, I've always loved the natural world, the outdoors. So I got involved in fly fishing. So I started writing about it and going out and photographing these adventures, and eventually I started selling, acting as kind of a travel agent, hosting trips and writing about it, photographing it, selling,
God,
and
fly fishing? That was excellent. How long did that
like,
last for?
like salmon fishing in your world. So it's that kind of.
Yes.
So, well, I still do it. I still have a foot in that world, but I've pulled back considerably. So, my vision is in this kind of last uh, episode of my life. I would like to really concentrate on this music archive. So, I thought about trying to get back on the stage, and I don't, I don't know if I could pull it off or not. But the thoughts live in the back of my head there.
Yes. So you've really just gone back and so was it 2020 that you sort of got to, right, I'm going to start archiving all this because
Well, it was a bit
frankly,
before that. I mean, it was probably as early as 2016 when I really started kind of thinking about it and trying to round up all the. I mean, I had shoe boxes full of tapes, a pack rat, I guess I am. And I thought, well, these things are just going to become so much landfill.
yes.
No, I mean, it's a shame. And just to kind of honor the the effort, the love that went into making this music with the people that I made it with, some of them have passed away, so that's always kind of, spurs you to
Well, yes.
tribute, right?
An urgency there comes in.
Yeah. So, and I don't know, and because I have had this kind of uh, life that is hopscotched around to all these uh, different avocations, I want to try to make sense of it all. So this
Right.
archive is some way for me to do that. Plus, I enjoy the publishing aspect of it, right? The graphic design, putting together these covers, like trying to. I mean, to me, the music is still relevant. I can't say I listen to a lot of new music, but I still think that these songs, lyrically, they don't always, to me, sound like they're from some specific period. I think they can still have some relevance. You know what? But understanding that all pop music is generational. People
Yes, but
people latch onto what they're given to listen to, right? So
yes, but I think the 80s, and probably every decade, but there's a lot of people really curious and obviously, there's a few labels who are really good at creating great compilations and putting collections as well as best of. I mean, Cherry Red Records in the UK is particularly good at that, and I think it just has kind of helped the younger generation who, have been kind of curious about. I mean, because the 80s, it looks quite groovy. I mean, in this country, it was a bit of a grim decade politically, but the music was
Yeah,
fantastic.
well, that's what I think spurred so much of that great music.
Yes. And
That's
I think so when people go back and because they don't they don't look at it like we did in that tribal way. They could look at new romantic songs, they could look at sort of the Smiths, and they could put it all together. Whereas we would be like, no, you can't put that band with that band. That just doesn't work. But for them, it's like, no, Depeche Mode is great. And it's like, yeah, but at the time, I sort of had pushed them away. But now I think they're brilliant. But at the time, I didn't. But they could they could even put Duran Duran in there. And you think, well, I suppose they were quite good. But at the time, it was like, oh God, no, you can't put
right.
Duran Duran in there or Sade.
Distance softens those edges.
Yeah, and you think, well, actually, it's quite a good song. I at the time you just had enough of look at them, looking at their pretty boy faces, really. But yeah, I think young people are really curious. I think they've been started to really because I've often seen on social media a lot of these people playing a bit of a song and dancing around to, which I find kind of like peculiar. But the songs they're singing are from 40 years ago and quite obscure indie songs. I'm thinking, I'm not even sure your parents would have listened to that. So I don't know. I'm curious how they discover some of these little
Yeah,
moments.
how did you get to that? Yeah. So have you heard a band called Bridget Calls Me Baby?
No.
Check them out.
What's it called, Bridget?
Bridget Calls Me Baby. They're a current band.
Hmm.
Actually, I got turned on to them by someone who liked The Pleasure's Pale and thought there were some similarities. But of course, this person is saying to me, that he's always looking for the new Smiths.
Right.
So looking for that something to fill that hole.
Yes. Well, that's good. So yes, I've found them on.
So, anyways, what am I getting around to saying is that that band is definitely one that put on this hat that said, "Okay, we're going to sound like an '80s band." But they have a few other touches, but I mean, there's a couple songs that sound like Spandau Ballet. I mean,
Right. Oh, well, I'll definitely
some of
go.
them are very Smithsy, very Smithsy, not quite the same jangly Johnny Marr thing, but I mean, the singer's quite extraordinary. So
I will
check it
check it
out.
out. So with all your archiving, so you do it mostly on well, you've got your website, but you put most of it on Bandcamp now. So
Yeah,
people
for merchandise, that seemed the best option for me. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how the digital platforms are evolving, right? I mean, right now, my main interest is making vinyl. No, I don't sell very much of it, but just in terms of an artifact,
it's beautiful.
that's what I wanted. I want to create, all those covers that you said were attractive. I want to create that tangible, beautiful thing, right? It's
Well,
like
absolutely.
an art book. I mean, you. I mean, if you can see behind, there's the shelves here are full of art books.
Well, they are.
So I'm totally drawn to that sort of tactile.
So you're a one-man band putting together all these collections and compilations and
Yeah, I mean,
releases
I've
and
kind of become an audio engineer. It's really, I mean, you have to imagine that some of these recordings are very rough, but the technology now, and I do have this another aspect of my personality is this ability to deal with like software.
right. Well, yes,
Well, and
yes.
because I was a graphic designer, that's how I kind of supported myself through playing music freelance, I'm a freelance designer, I got comfortable with using things like Photoshop and page layout programs and designing, things like books. And so, this is all second nature to me to do things like this. So I have to learn some now. I mean, anybody with a reasonably powerful computer and, enough of a budget to buy some software, you can make, uh, you know, good sounding music.
Yes.
Right. But this music that I have, a lot of it is transferred from cassettes, like the big professional stuff. I had the 2-inch master tapes. So I had to take those somewhere and have them transferred. And so I digitized as much as I could
Yeah.
during the pandemic. I mean, this was what I did, you know, was get all that stuff digitized. And so now I've got this massive, uh, you know, number of recordings that I can access and that I can restore. And that restoration, a lot of times, is fairly involved. So there's some very particular software for doing that sort of a thing, where you're actually looking at the sound in a visual representation. You're like, okay, well, that's distortion, and that's, oh, look at that, there's a dropout there, so where you can go in and you can try to patch it back together to something you know listenable.
Yes, clean and
And
yeah.
but because of how crisp and clean music can sound now, I think, in a way, I mean, you think of a band like Black Keys. What made them popular is that they didn't sound super clean, right? They actually had this kind of grit to what they were doing. It was oral grit, right? The sound of it was like saturated, and it didn't sound like this super clean, you know, antiseptic pop sound, right? So I think there's room for that in the landscape of listening.
Yes. So
And
so I'm just impressed with the amount of so you set yourself up on the Bandcamp page with digital as well as CD, and also you've got vinyl and T-shirts and merchandise. So is that all your work that you put together?
yeah, yeah. I feel like I'm just kind of scratching the surface.
Yes. And on the
If
vinyl,
I can stay alive for 20 more years, I've got a lot more I can do.
well,
But
absolutely.
vinyl thing is interesting. What I was going to get to was, these platforms are evolving. So, uh, I live in a condominium with not a lot of space here. I rent a storage space somewhere, but that's full, mostly with my wife's clothes. But so I can't, like, even if I raise the money to make 1,000 records pressed, what am I going to do with them? I'm not going to sell them.
No.
So, this whole invention of the lathe cut record is, it's a way to make just a few. And yeah, here, I'll show you one.
Oh yes, let's have a look. Oh, I'll
So
have to. Oh, here it
ju-
is.
I just sold this one today, actually. So
I
this
got
is
it.
Pleasure's Pale, Most Precious Thing. So this is a big project that I worked on last year. What I did is I took all of the professional recordings that the Pleasure's Pale did at Rephrase Studio in Dayton, and they were all transferred to digital. And I went back and I worked with our original engineer, and he remixed 4 songs, and then I remixed the rest of them here, and I put them all together. So this is like a sort of a remixed. I mean, they're not remixed in what the industry calls a remix now. They're
No,
just like mixed, again, mixed again. But it's like the full catalog, minus there's one song that didn't make it in here because we couldn't find it. But so this is essentially the extent of the Pleasure's Pale professional recording made into modern mixes. So there's a few little extra bits here and there that were never originally recorded, but essentially they're all in the spirit of the original song.
Right.
So, so it's quite an exquisite.
So how did you print many of those up?
No, I just had actually, this is the only one. It was supposed to be 6 in blue vinyl.
Yes.
They sent me 6 in clear vinyl. So then I complained and they sent me 1 in blue vinyl, but someone just bought it today. So off it goes.
Blimey, that is, well, I think that's a very sensible move, but all the
I've done a
same.
lot of 7 inches. So along with this project, there were 6 7-inch singles that some of the mixes are on here, and some of them are alternative mixes. Like I told you that Gary King did some of the mixes, and then I'd mix the same song. So you could get the 7-inch would have a different mix. So
Yes.
someone wanted to be a completist, they could buy this, and they could buy the 6 7-inch singles, and they're all those graphic, those covers that you're seeing there on the.
Yes. God, it's a beautiful project, I have to say.
So for me, it's quite satisfying to put something like that together.
Well, it's like you said, and there's also, a bit of emotional processing that can go on to sort of, make sense of it all, because, frankly, it's part of your life, and these things happen, and then you sort of put them to one side, but then it's quite nice to revisit and to give that appreciation, because I think sometimes it's easy not to always focus on the really positive, good things, but all the stories we often tell ourselves and repeat on a constant level are the failures and the problems and the fallouts, rather than well, yes, but there was all these other things. But we choose to often focus on, yes, the sort of more difficult parts of life, which then isn't a great thing for your sort of emotional and spiritual state, really.
Well, I think that that's a really good point, because one of the reasons for doing this archive is that I want to talk about this music, but I want to talk about it objectively, where I'm not actually, if it doesn't sell, that's not so much the point. It's like, I just want to make this art, and this is where it came from. This is what I think it's about. And yeah, some of that might be saying, maybe this is not a great song, but this is what we did. This is what happened. This is how it came about. This is what we thought, or I think it means. So it's like, it's given me a chance to step back from it, not be so personally responsible for it. I don't know if you,
Yes.
it's like, if you don't like it, okay. I mean, if it doesn't sell, that's okay. I'm just saying that it happened, and it's some art. It was made by people in a room playing music. And it means something in the continuum of humanity. It's a statement.
Oh, absolutely. And yes, I mean, it's always interesting. I think having that feeling that it doesn't really need to. I think it's difficult when you do a project and you have an expectation of sort of sales and sort of that. It's almost difficult. It's a bit grubby. Whereas actually, if you can just look at one piece and think, God, this is just a beautiful bit of art, and I've just gone and sold it. I don't know. It's better than going, God, I got 300 under my bed, and frankly, I've only sold 5. It makes it quite difficult, because I've done various projects where you think, God, I bet everyone's going to be interested, so let's make sure we print enough and it'll be fantastic. And you think, oh, actually, no one's that bothered, are they? But I quite enjoyed if I had sort of redid it, I would have just said, look, let's just enjoy the process and have it as a bit of a thing between us, enjoying it rather than getting.
So there are these platforms that are developing that are kind of cut vinyl on demand.
Oh,
right? So, like there's one just kind of rolling out right now from the East Coast here, where you can subscribe and you can put your music up on their, they'll give you a page. It's kind of a Bandcamp kind of thing, and you can even integrate it eventually with Bandcamp. I don't think they're that far, or with Spotify or Shopify.
yeah.
So like your fans can buy direct from this page, or they can buy from your Bandcamp page, and then it's made, but it's made just one at a time, right? So it's and in an environmental sense, it makes a lot more
Yes,
sense. But
absolutely.
it opens up, it democratizes the thing. It's that great democratizing that we thought the internet would be until it wasn't. But yeah, but there, this is something that's kind of shooting up. There are a handful of there's another one of these platforms that I tried for a while, and it had some problems. Um, but like SoundCloud is now they're offering one-off vinyls from a company in the UK called Elastic Stage.
Oh, wow.
They're making these one-off vinyls that you can buy through SoundCloud.
Well, that's interesting. Well, it's good to know that all these things are kind of slowly happening. Because I still think there is something, like you said earlier, about the vinyl record that is just a beautiful object, which is hard to get quite so sentimental about a plastic CD case.
Classic CD, or just the music on your phone,
Yes, I know.
Spotify, or whatever your.
I know. It's convenient but soulless, really, isn't it? Anyway.
Yeah.
But look, Jeff, well, thank you ever so much. I'm gonna have to go to bed soon, actually.
Yeah, it is getting late for
Oh,
you.
so where are you at the moment? Are you in San Francisco now?
Yes, I am.
Right. And is it a nice place you got?
Yeah, it's a condominium. It's in the kind of in the middle of the city. So you know, I like it here. Uh, I think San Francisco. I mean, it's a bit sad making for me because I think I saw the end of the bohemian era of San Francisco. I mean, now we're surrounded by uh, software engineers. I mean, there's like, where did all the freaks go?
Yes.
So it's like, I mean, there is a music scene still, but I have to confess that I'm kind of out of the loop on it. I mean, there's something out there, but it's a lot of the clubs are gone. Uh, and it's just the priorities of the city are different. I mean, to be, uh, to use an expletive, it used to be a place where you could go and tell the world to fuck off. San Francisco. I'm not sure it's that anymore because it's very expensive to live here now. And we're just lucky that, we got situated kind of early enough where we're in a good spot. But most of the people that we knew here in the creative community have split.
Right.
So times change. The
Times,
world.
yes. It's always strange. But look, I have to say thank you ever so much again for this. This has been amazing. And I'm sort of very curious with your website, so I'll explore some more later. But yes, thank you for your time. And I'll keep in touch. I'll send you a link if you want as well. And you can put it on your social media
Yeah.
page.
Look,
Because,
let me ask you one more thing before
yes, yes.
sign off. Uh, were you familiar with a TV show in the UK called Renford Rejects?
No, Jesus, I've never heard of it. Rent.
It was ran in the. It was about a group of teens on a football team. uh,
Oh,
Ran on your TV in the late 90s. So you don't know about it? It wasn't on your radar?
No, I guess the late 90s possibly that was yes, I got it here. Yes, it's so. No, I wasn't familiar with it at all.
Well, I found out just 2 years ago that some of the music from Myself a Living Torch was used in that show without my knowledge. That's through, this archive, I started uh, because the
Amazing.
Myself a Living Torch music got posted to YouTube when I released it. Then I started getting these comments from people in the UK saying, "Oh my God, this was my favorite show. I'm glad to finally find this music." You're kidding me. You mean that my music was used in this show and I never knew about it? So,
My God. And did you ever get any? Have you ever had any royalties from it?
no. Well, I have a lawyer, but who knows what's going to happen? I mean, it's Nickelodeon who are now Paramount. It's a David and Goliath thing. I don't know if I will eventually file a copyright claim if they don't settle with me, but I don't give you the whole story about how it probably happened, but anyhow,
Yeah. Well, no, it's an interest. Well, I'd noticed they played Chumbawamba on it, and Edwin Collins, and
yeah,
the
Manic Street
and,
Preachers had the
and
opening theme.
Republica. Yes. Wow.
Our song, one of some of our music was the closing theme. There were like 54 episodes total, and so like 48 of them had like our music as the closing theme.
Cheeky. God.
Yeah, yeah. And
Well,
with credit.
well, hopefully, fingers crossed, you all get, a nice little something.
Yes, right.
Anyway, look, I'll let you go, but thanks again, and I'll keep in touch. Take care. Have a
All
lovely
right.
day. See you
Good
later.
night. All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye.
And that was me in conversation with Jeff Bright, talking about his life in music. This has been the C86 Show. David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 Show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.